Welcome to Beyond Bitcoin, a podcast about all things digital assets, the global communities they are creating, the generations that are using and investing in them, and the challenges faced by the nations that are seeking to regulate them. The content of this program is not to be taken as investment advice. The opinions expressed in the program by the host and the guests are their personal opinions only. Remember, feel free to subscribe and share with like-minded friends. My name is Deryck Graham. I'm the CEO of Portal Asset Management, and my co-host is Nitin Gower, Managing Director of State Street Digital Assets. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world, and welcome along to another episode of Beyond Bitcoin. My name is Deryck Graham, and I'm here with my friend and colleague today, Nitin Gower. Hello, Nitin.
Hey, Deryck. Looking forward to another amazing week of Beyond Bitcoin. Of course, I'm now dialing in from London. So this is three different cities, 3 different weeks. And so looking forward to this another interesting conversation, this time on a completely different topic. I believe you have a guest today, Deryck. So why don't you make some introductions?
We certainly do. The great thing about it is that you and I might remember that we used to complain about always talking about regulations and constantly talking about the market, the regulations, the market, et cetera, because the industry wasn't moving forward. It was focused on price. And one of the things that we now do is we've got extraordinary guests that we're able to invite on that talk about what's actually happening in the industry, what sort of hardware is getting developed, what sort of software solutions are getting out there, what the metaverse might look like, etc. And today, I'm delighted to say we've got Dr. Andrew Mason who's joined us. And Andy Mason, in fact, has been a friend of mine for many, many years and is based in Perth. And he's been working with Apple for some time, and he's been an investor in this space for a long time. Hello, Andy. Welcome along.
Thanks, Deryck. Hi, Nitin. How are you going?
Hey, Andy. Good to have you. Looking forward to this chat. I really am, because you're a fellow technologist and an ex-Apple, employee. So love to get your perspectives here.
So as a bit of a backstory here, as I said, Andy and I have been friends for a long time. And some number of years ago, Andy said to me, I'm working at Apple on a Black Ops program. And I went, oh, really? A Black Ops program? Tell me about that. And of course, you can't tell me about that. It's a Black Ops program. So I went, I'm sure he told me what he's doing at Apple. And I'd forgotten by that stage. Many years had passed. He continued to work with quite a substantial team based out of Perth. And we still didn't know what he was doing. And then came the announcement of Apple's goggles. And within about a week of that, Andy said, that's what I've been working on. So I'm intrigued, Andy. Maybe tell us a bit about what you've been working on, a little bit about your history in crypto, and a lot about what you think Apple's view of the world is in regards to these classes.
Sure. Okay. So firstly, I'll give you a bit of background about myself. I'm a bit of a dinosaur in the software industry. I think I wrote my first computer program 50 years ago. And my first job as a software engineer was 45 years ago, and I started with IBM Australia as an associate systems engineer. So all I've done for my entire life is worked writing computer software. But I actually first started studying architecture at university and became very interested in the very basic computer graphics and computer-aided design software that was around at the time. And that's what I really fell in love with. And my intention was to always write computer graphics and computer-aided design software. And that's what I did for 20 years. I had a company writing naval architecture software. And then when I sold that around 2011, 2012, I did a couple of different things in software, including a startup. And then it was a bit of a loose end. And I'd always wanted to work in movies, particularly special effects. And I ended up getting a job with Peter Jackson's Weta Digital special effects company in New Zealand. And I moved to Wellington for a year and a half. And what we were developing, or what I was working on, I worked with 2 very clever guys. And so Simon Clutterbuck and Richard Dorling, who had both won Academy Awards for a piece of software called Tissue, which was muscle simulation software for creating creatures and animals, human beings, and all of the muscles and and that was first used in Avatar in 2009. And I worked there for a year and a half, and then just out of the blue, we effectively got approached by Apple, or was talking to Apple about, well, we weren't really sure, but they offered the three of us jobs. And we went to work for Apple in January 2016. And as it turned out, we were amongst the first 20 or 30 people involved in a very new project, which turned out 8 years later, it was announced as the Apple Vision Pro. So it's a mixed reality, but also AR and VR headset, very high quality, about 4K resolution per eye, and an absolutely fantastic device. But Apple's actually been working on it for over 8 years already. And so we were lucky enough to get involved in that. And the area that we were hired for was basically human representation, how you represent a human being in a 3D device. Now, I should say here that even though the product has been announced, there's very little I can actually tell you directly about the work we did, because I'm under a very strict non-disclosure agreement with Apple, and they would literally have my head if I gave away any secrets. But what I can say is that, you know, we did some early work on the development of avatars, or as they're called now, personas for the headset. And the team that I worked with at Apple was responsible for the eyesight feature, which is the display on the front of the headset that shows your eyes and eyebrows and a small part of your forehead to people outside the headset. So when they look at you, it looks like they can see your entire face rather than you being hidden behind a blank headset. And the idea there is that it improves the connection between you and anybody else that's in the room. They can basically see you through the headset. It just looks like you're wearing a pair of ski goggles, and you can see them. Basically, even if you're involved in something in virtual reality, if they approach you, they basically break through the imagery and you see their face. They get your attention. The headset does that automatically. And you can then have a conversation with them, even though you've been immersed in virtual reality, and then you can go back to VR. So it basically means that instead of people being cut off in VR from everybody outside, and you know their wives and partners and husbands basically getting annoyed because they're isolated from what's happening and they can't see their face, they can't talk to them, you can actually have a connection with the person who's wearing the goggles. You can have a conversation with them, and then they can go back to what they were doing. So that turned out to be a very, very important feature of the headset. And I think the team's done an amazing job in implementing that. It actually looks fantastic. But yeah, I mean, what can I say? The headset, funnily enough, I've actually only worn the headset for a total of about an hour, because I was working remotely up until early 2020 when COVID hit. And at that point, I hadn't, the headset wasn't far enough developed for me to be able to see it. I was actually scheduled for a trip to California in, I think, March or April 2020, and it had to be cancelled a week before I was due to fly out because of COVID. And as a result, I worked remotely in Perth without travelling to the US at all for 3 years. And then the first time I was actually able to travel to California was March this year, and that's the first time that I actually saw the headset and was able to wear it and experience it in person. And in a way that was great, because I didn't have to see it when it was partially finished and where the software was buggy and jerky and everything else that software goes through when it's under development. I got to see a finished product, or very close to finished product, and I have to say, it's amazing. Until you try it, until you put it on, you just can't believe how good it is.
So Andrew, tell us a few things, right? One is, it's been 8 years in making, as you mentioned, and Web3 has been a relatively newer concept in terms of its inception, from the read and read write to read write on, and the conceptual elements that surround the ownership of our content, our data, our engagement. And so the way I've viewed Metaverse elements in general is technology, and you have elements of computer vision, AI, blockchain, of course, as a transaction system, cloud, network, all the hardware infrastructure that goes behind it. And then, of course, you have this user interactivity and extended reality, which is where the modalities come into play. The goggles, for example, play a very critical role in access point into this virtual world that is envisioned, which allows us as avatars or digital representation of us to interact with the ecosystem. And this is, again, us being sandwiched between technology and ecosystem. Ecosystem implies social acceptance, the security and privacy elements, our digital identity that represents us in avatar, which is hard to replicate, content creation, virtual economy. So these are, to me, some of the true elements, which is portrayed oftentimes only as gaming ecosystems in Metaverse. Tell us more about one. This is a relatively new concept. So when these goggles were developed or this hardware was developed, was it purely for interaction, or did it actually had some elements and some vision around this, what we now begin to, characterize Web3 as a broad vernacular that captures all the facets of the digital asset ecosystem?
I honestly don't know. It's very hard to say what the goals of the original designers of the headset were. Obviously, productivity applications for professionals, or what they term prosumers, so not consumers, but people who are creatives or people who basically make videos, make content for others. But I think when the project started, there wasn't really this concept of Web3 at all. Keep in mind this was 8 years ago. And I think the other thing is that Apple is still feeling their way in this area because they have their own ecosystem. At the moment, they don't have any immediate need to step outside that ecosystem. They have the App Store for the iPhone and iPad. They have their own apps, and they're pretty comprehensive. But they also have an enormous, it's well over 1 million developers, third-party developers developing for them. And I think the key thing that Apple has always focused on is privacy and security. So, when you look at Facebook and Google, there's an old saying, if you look at a company, online, and you can't see what the product is, then you're the product. And that's the case with Facebook and Google. The way they make money is by providing you a service for free and then using the data you give them to target ads towards you. And Google makes billions of dollars basically just from ads. That's what it does. That's all it does. Everything it gives you for free is so that it can get advertisers and target their ads specifically to individual groups based on the data they've collected about those. And Facebook's basically doing the same thing. And they're targeting your specific needs to try and sell you specific products. And that's where they make their money. Apple isn't like that. Apple's not selling user data to try and attract advertising. Apple's a hardware company and a software company as well. It's selling hardware and software to provide an environment that consumers can use to access everything else that's on the web. But that's where they make their profits. And fine, they have the music store, they have the app store, they have Apple TV Plus. They're selling lots of content, but they're not selling ads to you. They're not using your data. So Apple has positioned itself very strongly that it is the company that firstly has end-to-end encryption on the data that you store on iCloud. For example, you can encrypt your laptop, you can connect to iCloud, and all of the data that you store on iCloud is encrypted in such a way that Apple can't access it. Didn't used to be the case. Lots of celebrities got their photos on iCloud hacked because they probably gave their passwords away unintentionally to somebody. But now you can actually have secure iCloud storage. The iMessage is end-to-end encrypted. Basically it's a secure system, and Apple is really pushing that privacy and security aspect of it. And they're really stressing that they're not taking your data and selling it. they are providing you with an environment where it makes hard for other people to access your data and target you. So, you've got ad blocking and, all sorts of functions to stop people tracking you online.
Yeah, so just to follow on Andrew in this, and we both are IBMers. We worked, and I spent a lot of time at IBM and founding the blockchain labs and figuring out as to. So the notion of Web2War companies, the companies that have their entire business revolved around the digital economy and the ecosystem that evolved from the TCP/IP evolution and connecting, this information networks in general. I think the tendency is still to have the same playbook, make money off software of some sort. Whereas I've always believed that while there's a lot of software and a lot of technology in the digital asset ecosystem, whether it's Metaverse or whether it's blockchain or whether it's DLT and cryptography and the zero knowledge proofs, all that make up the lion's share of technology that's going into this era. I think the business opportunity that represents here, it's from the new evolving business model as opposed to just plain old software, which was the playbook of the last era. And we've seen that. I've had many failed attempts at IBM. We've seen Facebook's investments /loss that we discussed early on into rebranding its company's name into Meta.
Yeah.
Apple's attempt, both with registration of XROS, which we'll discuss in a few minutes, as well as understanding the purchase of NFTs and the role of NFTs with Axie Infinity era. So you begin to see some companies having to take the time to understand this, some companies jumping right into it. I'd love to get your vantage point as a technologist, because I view this as a technologist, but also the fact that the world has changed and the Web2 companies' foray into this era should be quite different than applying the same playbook that has worked for them in the last era, so to speak.
Yeah. I think the key thing to stress here is that, and a good example is actually the Vision Pro project, that for many, many years, people thought that Apple was doing nothing in this space. And and I can actually say that as an individual trying to, for example, hire people to work on our project when we couldn't actually tell them what it was about. We had a lot of situations where potential employers, and we were chasing, very highly qualified, very capable people, would just turn us down flat because they didn't think that Apple was doing anything relevant in the space, and they wanted to go to companies where they could do research and publish that research. And Apple, was very reluctant to publish anything that it considered confidential. Ooh. So, but the assumption that Apple doesn't do things or isn't aware of particular things is almost always wrong. Apple is always looking at new technology. It always fosters investigation of new technologies by individuals. It fosters curiosity. And there's always little projects going on investigating things. And if those projects come to nothing, you never hear about it. If they show some promise, then they will get more headcount and more funding and develop further. So just because Apple hasn't done anything with Web3 or NFTs or anything like that, it doesn't mean they're unaware of it. They may not have anything massive in the works, but in general, Apple is very good at staying abreast of current research and developments. And you have to assume that they will keep up with all technologies, but they are very reluctant to go first and fail. They would rather sit back and be, there used to be a lot of talk about first mover advantage, and first mover advantage on the internet was very important, but it actually, Facebook showed that second mover advantage was actually more important, that the company that came in second or third and did it best was the one that succeeded.
Andy,
some of the social media companies that were around early just failed.
I have a beautiful latest model MacBook Pro here, and I've got a Apple phone, and I've been tempted to the watch, but it's just too much gadgetry for me. And so in other words, I'm immersed in Apple's hardware, and I really like it, and I have done for years. And hopefully it'll be there for a long, long time. But I'm also immersed in this in this Web 3.0, this blockchain-driven Internet of Value, this world that we refer to as read, write, own coming up. And I'm very excited about it because I think it's both technically and socially tectonic. And it'll enable people to own their own data, both worked data and inferred data, and it'll enable them to transact instantaneously across the world. And I think it'll create economies based upon capability versus based upon religion or division or borders or governments. And to me, philosophically, I'm really excited about that. But it also means a transition from Web 2.0. And you and I have discussed that. The Apple is the dominant player in Web 2.0. It's worked out its business model. You've explained that to us earlier on, and it does very well in it. But Web 3.0 is coming without any questioning that, And it'll be interesting to see how we see interaction with a Web 2.0 company like Apple in a Web 3.0 massive global community that's starting to form in front. And I'm hopeful that what we'll see is the brilliance of these Apple goggles and equivalents getting created and then being utilized in both the open and the Web 2.0 environment. Do you see that Apple's likely to enable that to occur? Or do you think they will stay for as long as they possibly can in Web 2.0 world?
Obviously I can't speak for Apple, and I don't know what their plans are in this area. One of the things about Apple is it's a very compartmentalized company, and there are projects that are confidential, and there's black projects, and there's extra black projects. And an extra black project, people within the company don't even know that the project number, for example, exists. So it's one thing to know that a project exists but not know what it is. It's another thing not to know the project exists at all. It's so confidential that the project number is not even known. So Apple is like that. They compartmentalize things, and it's a very need-to-know basis. So obviously I can't talk to what Tim Cook and the Apple executive is thinking. But I also think that Apple is driven by demand, and both from consumers, but also demand from developers. And when you've got over 1 million developers developing software, they get driven by what they think is a market opportunity. So, if the market opportunity goes somewhere else, the developers will follow it. So I think Apple will always go where it makes sense to go, but they won't be first. They will wait until the market shakes out and it's obvious what the right way to go is, and then they will come in and do things, particularly on the user interface, user experience front. They will do things better than everybody else has. And that's where Apple has always shone.
Sure, and one thing I think to your point also, Andrew, is that unlike Facebook and Google, who have had the entire business model around third-party data, which is my and your data, and eventually having the ad revenue and advertisers sort of having the platform leveraged based on that information, Apple is a tad bit different because they're driven by personal devices and the ecosystem around my personal devices, whether it's an app store, whether it's my phone, whether it's having a unified perspective. And their enormous focus on privacy and security lately, I think, has given them a lot of kudos from its constituents, which is me and Deryck, who are enamored with their devices and the engineering excellence they bring, not just the hardware level, but a seamless transition of ensuring that my data is my data and it's kept safe and I'm paying for that. Exactly. And that's the model they've chosen. So I think that to me is much more promising than I would say Facebook getting into this or Google getting into this, only because of the fact that they have historically exploited, and that was their business model from the Web2War era, which is what has been now brought into focus. When we talk about read, write, own, that at least in Apple ecosystem, I still own my data and I'm paying for it. for that ownership in form of a fee, whether it's I'm paying for iCloud or whether I'm paying for the data. So it's a little bit tad different. I think it's more acceptable to me as a privacy enthusiast and who believes to sort of keep a moat around my own. Let me choose what's best for me. Thinking, right? So
yeah.
So I just want to ask this, and that is that we pride ourselves by only exclusively having people that are very wealthy and tech savvy listening to us, and so therefore we expect every one of our listeners to be able to afford one of the Apple goggles coming up, and you said it perfectly at the beginning. It's their prosumers, which is a beautiful statement. So really, professional consumers are going to be buying these glasses to begin with. Maybe tell our listening audience a little bit about what the estimated price is going to be, what the capabilities of the glasses are immediately, how you see people using it immediately, and less sort of, let's say vision, there's always vision in these glasses, less visionary in regards to where they might go with the metaverse and where they just are really cool right now, and what they're like to use.
Okay. So the first thing is we mustn't call them goggles. They're not goggles.
Sorry.
So you can call it a headset, but it's better to call it a Vision Pro.
Yeah, well, yeah. They're not goggles, they're a mask. Yep.
So the key thing, the key thing with the Vision Pro is that there's what's come before is basically virtual reality headsets. Then the Microsoft HoloLens was brought out. And the HoloLens was an augmented reality headset. So basically it had a visor in front of your eyes and images were projected onto that visor so that a small portion of your field of view had images on it. And they could be people, they could be other things. And that's augmented reality. And you can do augmented reality with your phone as well. You can just hold up the phone, use the camera to bring images in, and then overlay, whether it's advertising or street signs or restaurant names or even the menu of a restaurant that's standing outside. Bring the menu online on your phone screen, things like that, or bus routes. There's all sorts of things, and you can do that today with an iPhone. There's lots of augmented reality apps. The big step forward for the Vision Pro was to make the system a mixed reality headset. So it's a headset that has two very high resolution displays inside, and then on the front of the headset are two cameras, and the two cameras are basically spaced approximately the position of your eyes and the distance apart of your eyes, and they take images from outside, and then those images are projected onto the screen. So when you put the headset on, it just looks like you're in the room you're in, because it's taking in the images. The focal length and the field of view of the cameras is similar to the focal length and field of view of your eyes. And it's presenting those on the screen, so you just see the outside world as normal. And then you can overlay different objects on your scene. So you can, for example, you can say, well, I want a big TV screen, the equivalent in terms of size of an 85-inch TV screen. And you just pull it up and there it is, and you can watch a movie. Even better, because you've got two screens, you can pull up a 3D movie and watch a movie in 3D. If you want to, you can just say, you've got your MacBook open, and instead of looking at your MacBook screen through the pass-through cameras on the front of the headset, you can basically mirror your MacBook screen in the Vision Pro, but you can actually put up, say, 3 4K screens side by side, panoramic view in your headset, and the quality of the text on those screens is as good as the quality of text on a 4K screen, basically. So you can bring up, as a working environment, you can sit in it and work and have a better environment than you would sitting working on a laptop.
Yes.
And so that's from the point of view of a productivity tool, that's amazing. The user interface, the first time I tried it on, I literally couldn't believe it, because what comes up is a a set of icons, and you go, well, you know, what do I do with these icons? You know, do I point to them or what? And the person that was with me went, no, you just look at them. I went, what do you mean? You just look at them, and you look at a particular icon, and it changes to show that it's highlighted because you're staring at it. And the quality of the eye tracking is absolutely astounding, as is the stability of the screen. So the icons appear unmoving in your field of view. So if you shake your head around with the headset on, the icons will stay in the same place in the room in front of you. And the tracking of that is amazingly stable as well. So you've got this environment where you can just look at the icon for an app that you want, and then you go, well, how do I double click that? And the person I was with said, well, you just tap your thumb and forefinger together. And I went, oh, like this. Well, hang on, like this, in front of me, you know, clicking on the icon. No. You don't do that. You can put your thumb and forefinger on the desk or in your lap and just tap them together. And there's down-facing cameras on the headset that will see your hands, and it can tell when you tap those fingers together. And then it will open up an app, and it could be, you know, one of the, I don't know how many iPhone and iPad apps there are, but these are all going to be compatible, or mostly compatible, with the Vision Pro, and you'll be able to bring up a screen with a 2D app, and it could be Excel or it could be Microsoft Word, and you'll be able to use the keyboard on your laptop or a separate keyboard. You'll be able to do productivity work. And so there's all of that Apple is leveraging this absolutely massive library of apps that can be used immediately in the Vision Pro. So there's that side of things. There's the other side of things is communication, and this is, you know, something I had a small part in working on, where you have personas. So you have FaceTime, and you obviously have people who are on their iPad or their iPhone, and they'll just appear as a screen in front of you, as a 2D screen. But you may be talking to other people who are using a Vision Pro, and because they've got a headset on and you've got a headset on, you know, how are you supposed to see their face? The face has to be recreated, and it has to be photorealistic. And so they create personas, which are, you have to enroll for. You have to do a 1 or 2 minute enrollment process using the Vision Pro or using your iPhone to capture your face. And once it's enrolled, you can then use that in effectively a 3D FaceTime call. And you can talk to people, and you can see them in 3D, and they can see you in 3D. And that's a very different experience as well. Yeah.
So one thing on this, Andrew, I think if you look at the modality of how, you know, at IBM we used to have Second Life. This is, I'm dating myself now. 20 years back, we had this kludgy-looking avatars, and you had to have the arrow keys to move forward, move backwards, sit in a conference room, and you would still have the conference done like we do now with web conference, except that you had a notion of what the industry terms as Metaverse today. But let's envision all the capabilities of, you know, of the headset that you described, from this advanced vision and using computer vision in engaging experience that these headsets would deliver to you. But imagine a world where today, if you look at and this is Deryck and me's day job in figuring this out, the various silos that are evolving in the blockchain and DLT and digital asset ecosystem. You have NFTs, you have gaming ecosystems, you have decentralized finance ecosystems, and these are all sort of foundationally linked with some level of wallet tokens, layer 1, layer 2 protocols, and so on and so forth. But can I imagine a world where, for example, I would take this advanced headsets, and because it has the ability to track it assumingly also has the ability for me to be able to authenticate myself using my biometrics, iris scan, for example. And that represents my identity, which is integrated into my avatar. And the avatar then becomes the engagement or digital engagement vehicle for various ecosystems, whether it's gaming or NFTs or decentralized finance, negating the complexity of the UI UX that has always been a challenge in this ecosystem of maintaining private keys and public keys. And suddenly you have a seamless infrastructure that unlocks that for digital signatures should I want to engage in moving my asset. And an example I give in my speech is where I could be a gamer and I would have 100 hours that earns me a sword, and the sword has special capabilities. And while not everybody understands the value of the sword, there is a market for it. And if I'm able to sell that sword, I'm, as an avatar, engaging in that commerce, selling the sword, obtaining a stable coin, then eventually moving the stable coin to DeFi ecosystem without having to go through multiple wallets. It is my avatar that basically goes to different ecosystems and trades them like I would normally do in a physical realm. Is that a feasible thinking in terms of the futuristic world as we build upon this digital asset ecosystems that are emerging and what I call as a seamless traversal of value between ecosystem and what Metaverse is meant to do, not just Second Life?
I mean, I think it's feasible. The part of this that I can speak to is the identity and security side of things. So one of the things in the design of the headset is that one of the things that Apple was very aware of the danger of and very careful to prevent or not to allow was impersonation. So if you have somebody who owns a headset and they leave it lying around and somebody is visiting their house, or one of their kids picks it up and puts it on and can then appear as a persona of the owner of the headset, then obviously that's an undesirable situation. Can result in fraud, embezzlement, all sorts of problems. So you're correct that the headset has iris scanning, but identity and security is a core component. And I probably can't go into the details of how that works, but I can guarantee you that it's an absolutely core concept in the design of the headset to make sure that, for example, you can lend your headset to somebody else and they can be enrolled as a different individual and multiple people can use the same headset, and you know that your identity is secure even when somebody else is using your headset. That's very important. And of course, if you have identity nailed down to that extent, it means you have some level of security going forward if you want to transact something. So where Apple's going with that, I actually don't know. I don't think that they're unaware of the options, and I think, as I said before, that they will be driven by what the market and particularly what the developers would be interested in. And that's pretty much all that you can hope for, that if this stuff is desirable to the market, then Apple will respond accordingly. But it has to be shown to be a workable system rather than something that Apple necessarily needs to abandon everything they've done with their Apple Pay system, with the app stores, that sort of thing. Apple's not going to jump into a new technology that's completely untried and untested. It's going to need somebody else to show that it works. And then Apple will. Basically, I think Apple is very open in this area. Like any new technology that there's demand for, Apple will find a solution for. It's in its interests financially to adopt something that people want. So, but as I said before, don't expect Apple to be the first company to present a solution. They have a history of being a second or third mover, sitting back, thinking about the best way to do things, implementing it in such a way that it's superior to what other people have done, and then reaping the rewards.
And so, and they've done that with Vision Pro, and we've seen it with the Google glasses beforehand and other things, and so your example's actually there. From the listener's point of view, and from our point of view, we should be looking at these extraordinary Vision Pro glasses as another piece of equipment that can enable so much of what we're dreaming about in this realm of being able to do business in an immersive environment, being able to get security validated, and I hope being able to use Web 3.0 kind of environments where people are generating income out of that environment. And to think that so much of this blockchain driven, artificially driven Web 3.0 vision that we see going forward, it needs extraordinary interfaces. And in fact, Apple has developed just that, an extraordinary interface. And obviously, from the Vision Pro, there'll be other variations of that which will become more advanced, more affordable, typical of technology. And so from our point of view, as the listener's point of view, I think we've just heard that there's an amazing piece of technology that can enhance our vision, so to speak, going forward in these new realms. And I thank you so much for coming along, Andy, and outlining that. It's not often we get somebody that is in a Black Ops program that has come out the other end and can explain what has happened here in that. Greatly appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed for your time, my friend.
Yeah,
I
my
agree,
pleasure.
and
Thank you.
thank you, Andrew, for sharing your perspectives. Not too often we get true technologists on this program, which I'm elated to have this exchange with you. So thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed our weekly conversation. If you have any questions, comments, or suggested topics, please contact Nitin Gower or myself on the emails displayed here or via our LinkedIn profiles. Feel free to subscribe and share with like-minded friends. Stay well, inquisitive, and engaged. See you next week.